Hi, my name is Paradis Minucher, and I'm sending my greetings from George Washington University in Washington, D.C. This is our first time we're having this webinar, so we're testing all this new technology, and please let us know. We're on video, audio, and chat here with you. It is my utmost pleasure to introduce and to greet our wonderful colleague here, Professor Nicole Mills from Harvard University. Professor Nicole Mills has a Ph.D. from Emory University in French and educational studies, and she has been a wonderful collaborator with us on Persian curriculum design and Persian language material development. Last summer, she collaborated with us in the Persian STARTALK 2011 at the University of Pennsylvania. She has taught at Harvard University and the University of Pennsylvania, where she was a colleague of mine, and we are really pleased that she has accepted our invitation today to talk to us about encouraging student collaboration, negotiation, and agreement in meaningful and relevant environments. So you should all be able to see this PowerPoint and hopefully see us in audio and video versions. So let us know through chat if there's any problem or any technical issues. Or I want to also thank the National Middle Eastern Language Resource Center, who is sponsoring this in every possible way, and both financially, spiritually, and technically from the Brigham Young University in Utah. So thank you all for participating, and Nicole, all yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Pardis. It's a pleasure to be here, both at George Washington and virtually. So my presentation today, as Pardis said, is entitled Encouraging Student Collaboration, Negotiation, and Engagement in Meaningful and Relevant Environments. And so to give you an overview of the presentation, what I plan to do today is talk a little bit about our students today, who are often called the NET-Genners. Talk about how constructivist learning and experiential learning can assist and can really encourage these learners. I'm going to talk about the differences between traditional versus experiential learning models and the relationship to the social turn in second language acquisition, as well as situated learning theory, and then talk about a global simulation curriculum format that I've incorporated at the Beginning French 2 curriculum, which takes place in Paris, France. And I'm going to propose some ideas and would really strongly welcome some ideas from you for a global simulation curriculum in Shiraz, Iran, encouraging possible course themes and interactive memoir assignments and oral exam topics and student-centered in-class activities and a possible final play. And then kind of go back to constructivist and experiential learning at the end of the presentation. So to begin, so NET-Genners, Generation Z. These are students that are with birth dates in 1990s and 2000s. These are our students. Increased use and familiarity with communications, media, and digital technologies. They're highly participative. They participate frequently in online interaction, collaboration, exchange. So they're used to being collaborative, they're used to being creative, and they're used to a lot of interaction from how they have been brought up. And they're used to being within different types of communities. So these NET-Genners, they tend towards independence and autonomy in their learning styles. And this more independent learning style has grown out of these habits of seeking and retrieving information from the internet, which is a striving contrast to previous generations of students who maybe have acquired information more passively from authority figures. So how can we effectively engage our students, these net geners, in the foreign language classroom? And constructivist learning has certain characteristics that I think could work quite well. In constructivist learning, the learning is learner-centered, with a focus on complex, realistic, relevant environments. A lot of opportunities for social negotiation, and a lot of opportunities for ownership and choice within the curriculum. Opportunities for investigation, creativity, engagement, and it's action-oriented. So the students are constantly active in the classroom via collaboration and creative tasks. So experiential learning is quite similar in many ways, and it's a way that we can help students experience real and meaningful tasks and experience real language in the classroom. How we can really connect foreign language learning with real life. And characteristics of experiential learning are that learners are active, they're responsible participants, they're proactive rather than reactive, lots of motivating and engaging context for learning. Again, similar characteristics: self-direction, autonomy, choice, imaginative and inventive thinking, outside of the box type of activities. I always like to think of when I talk to my own teaching assistants about teaching, so what is going to excite your students? What's going to get them really excited to talk about a topic? What cultural topic? What issue? What's going to grab them? And that's what you really want to include in your classroom. Again, collaboration, cooperative work, authentic language use, and again, real-life language use. Meaningful reasons for doing things. Why are they reading this task? Why are they reading this text? Why are they listening? What's the point? If there is no real-life, meaningful point, then maybe this isn't the best task for the classroom. So some of the differences between a more traditional style and an experiential learning style. Well, in traditional learning style, the view of learning is that there's a transmission of knowledge. So the teacher is sort of the authority, and then the knowledge is transmitted to the students. And it's mainly frontal instruction, where students are sitting and the teacher is then giving that knowledge to the students. And then students can be relatively passive in this type of format. Whereas in experiential learning, learning is more transformation of knowledge. So using knowledge, working with knowledge, transforming it, practicing. It's facilitative. So the teacher is a facilitator, helping students collaborate together. The learner's role is active participation, whether it be in small group or large groups. What we see often in a traditional side is maybe that the grading process is very static. It's predefined from the beginning. Whereas in an experiential classroom, you might see the emphasis is on the process. Maybe there's a project that the students are working on throughout the course of the semester, and there's a lot of moments where they can revisit and revise and rework. Social and communication, again, playing a really important role. Where you see evaluation is often product-oriented, evaluation in experiential learning is process-oriented. Like I had said before, so the view of the curriculum is a process. With all that social and the social communication and the collaboration, this leads to more recent discussions about the social turn in second language acquisition. And so this idea that language learning is not just cognitive. Language learning is both social and cognitive. So the language learner has a very key role as a participating social agent in the language acquisition process. If we think about communication, we realize that interaction with others is essential. We wouldn't have communication if we weren't trying to transmit a message to someone else. So higher order functions develop out of social interactions, meaning that social interactions and collaboration and interaction is of the utmost importance because students learn through interaction. So how can we encourage students to be more social and to be more interactive in the foreign language classroom? One of the ways is to create a community of practice. People learn by participating in communities of practice, and communities of practice don't necessarily have to be just within a classroom. They can extend beyond the classroom in an authentic type of environment. Learning is experienced through relationships, and learning comes from a variety of sources. So not only from the teacher. So it's taking away this idea that the teacher is the master of pedagogy. You can learn, and as I'm sure many of you have learned, in a lot of different environments. Leyden Wenger talk about apprenticeships, for example, that have existed in the past. Apprenticeships, things that you've learned by participating in a family community. There are a lot of different communities and ways in which we learn outside of the classroom. How can we develop a curriculum that encourages the establishment of community, relationships, social interaction, authentic opportunities for learning? Simulation. So what happens in global simulation is that students create a fictive yet culturally grounded world. They assume the role of a self-developed character, and they collaborate with fellow community members. So it's simulation. The students are working on throughout the course of the semester. It could be a performance. It could be a project. Contexts in which it's been used in the past are hotel, for example. We're going to establish a hotel with each person playing a different role or have a different job in the hotel. A business, in a Spanish for business class, or business for Spanish class, I should say. They create a business with each person playing a key role in the creation of that business, creating or putting on an international conference. And what I'm going to talk about is a building. So students all living together in a building as neighbors in a particular city, in the country and culture of your choice. So what happens with global simulation, which is really exciting, is that the role of the learner is no longer to just listen and regurgitate information. But what they have to do instead is they have to take all of this content together. They have to negotiate meaning, and they have to reflect, because they all have to put together this final product. They're engaging in learning, and what's so fun about teaching in this format is that they're engaging in learning in ways that they kind of forget they're even learning. Because they're so focused on the task at hand and negotiating and communicating to reach this particular task. Levine in 2004 said that global simulation validates students' sense of self in the process of cultural exploration, and importantly, allows students' cultural and linguistic learning to proceed experientially in ways that approximate life, which facilitates higher motivation. So once they're in it, because they have a really strong interest or desire to participate in the community, all of a sudden the learning process changes. They've found something to be excited and engaged in. Another, with emphasis on the other, in particular the Parisian other. By engaging in a simulation of life in Paris, we will explore the construction, the evolution, and the complexity of Parisian identity through French and Francophone texts, images, film, advertisements, and songs. And so we tell them, for the Global Simulation Project, you will become the tenants of a Parisian building located in the Montmartre quarter, and you will write a book of your memoirs, writing about the events that happen in the building with your fellow neighbors. You're going to pretend to be a French or Francophone person living in France. You will develop your own character and tell the story of his or her life in the first person. So the students, we first begin the semester with a discussion of stereotypes, so as to avoid the development of a stereotyped character. And then we ask the students to create a character of their choice. They can be young, they could be older, they could change gender, they could be a male or a female. They could be, we have different students that are dancers, that are artists, that are professors. They decide who they want to be, and they create the character. So in conjunction with this theme that we have, we tell the students that by the end of the semester, we would like them to be able to engage in conversations, simple conversations, about people, places, relationships, personal life, interests. We want them to begin to be able to start to speak and write in the past, present, and future tenses, make suggestions, express emotions, express opinions, extend, accept, refuse invitations, give advice, make travel arrangements, express hypothetical situations. So these are all of the different functions that we hope that they're able to do in line with the course themes and then also in line with the grammar that we're reviewing in the class. So to give you an idea of some of the course content, we start the semester with the theme is the stereotypes of French and Parisians. Then we move to a discussion of the Montmartre Quarter and Place du Théâtre. Then lodging in Paris, an exploration of Parisian apartments. So typical vocabulary that you're going to see in an elementary or an intermediate level textbook, it's just integrated a little bit differently. We talk about relationships and love in Paris, which we also have, I'll talk a little bit about later, but we have the students develop a love story between two characters. Activities, sites, transportation system in Paris, different quarters of Paris. The film Amélie, which takes place in this particular quarter where they're living. We study les beaux-arts, the fine arts, music, art, film. We talk about the Festival of Music. We talk about the theater, La Comédie Française, in particular, a particular play, Le Malade Imaginaire by Molière. We talk about media, television, film, all immersing them in the culture of the city while they're engaging in the simulation. And at the end of the semester, we show a film called Paris Je t'aime, which it's a series of short films that each take place in a different quarter of Paris. So at the same time, so for example, while we're discussing relationships and love in Paris, we review the past tenses, so passé composé and the imparfait. While we're talking about lodging in Paris, we introduce the relative pronouns. While talking about, the different quarters of Paris, we introduce question formation. While talking about les beaux-arts, or fine arts, we introduce the subjunctive and ways to express emotion and to express opinions. While we're talking about media and television and film, we introduce hypothetical situations with the conditional. So all these things just become intertwined in a way that becomes meaningful to them. And the simulation, a big part of the simulation is the memoir chapters. So the students write chapters in their memoirs that they share. So everyone reads everyone's memoir chapters. I've used Facebook in the past as a way for them to share their memoir chapters. You can also do this very easily via a discussion board. But it's very important that they have access to everyone else's, every other character's story. So the first one is present a description of your character in the first person. Write a description of the Montmartre Quarter and his or her apartment in the building. Be careful to avoid stereotypes and include the different grammar topics that we discussed. Narration, a fascinating story. So you decide to visit one of your neighbors from the building. While drinking a cup of tea or a glass of wine, your neighbor tells you an intriguing story about two of your neighbors. A love story, a sad story, a dramatic story. So now the students are now taking characters that they've met from the classroom that live in this building, and they're developing relationships. So they might create a love story between two characters. They might create a dramatic story, a mystery between two other characters. And so the story starts to develop the collective storyline. Then in the third, one of your neighbors who you don't particularly like, because that's a very interesting part of this, what happens is the students end up developing these funny relationships with each other. People that they have become friends with, people that they become enemies with, people that they're scared of, or they have all these different types of interactions with these people. So one of the assignments is one of the neighbors who you don't particularly like very much invites you to do an activity in Paris. So what activities does he suggest? What quarters? What forms of transportation do you take? How do you get there? In dialogue format, recreate the conversation between you and this character using the different question formations and the expressions of necessity, the future tense. And then the last one is a persuasion type essay. While we're learning about art and fine arts, we talk about the Centre Pompidou, which is a museum of modern art in Paris. And we talk about notions of modern art and the value of modern art and what they believe about modern art. Well, so then we link to this memoir chapter is you decide to spend the day at the Centre Pompidou with the neighbors in your building while looking at the artwork such as Instruments de musique by Braque or Fontaine by Duchamp. You hear a loud scream. Later, one of your neighbors was found murdered in the dumpster behind the museum. And in his or her hand, you find a note with the message Querelle des Universaux. The rumors run wild in the building. And each neighbor has their own version of what happened. Recount the story. And so typically what I do is to make this kind of fun is there's always one character in the building that loves being hated. So really causes trouble with the other characters and loves it. So typically what I do is I pull that character aside or that student aside and I say, you know what, for this last memoir chapter, I think we're gonna murder you. Just want to tell you in advance. And so I have all of the students write who they believe murdered. We have a trial in class. And then after the trial, I have the student who was actually murdered post the real answer to what actually did happen at the Centre Pompidou. So what's exciting about this is that the students are now breaking free from these traditional and expected roles. So they're not only playing the role of a student in the classroom, they're playing the role of many different, they're putting on many different types of hats, and they're having to have relationships with different types of people. They're experimenting, and they're being creative, and they're engaging, and they're not only writing for you, they're writing to enhance the storyline and to enhance the story of the class. Often they're not as interested in me knowing what they wrote, but what their classmates think about what they wrote, which I find exciting. Their fears are often allayed because they can see everyone else's writing assignments and they can say, hey, you know, I can do this. That's something I can do. Or sometimes it actually encourages competition. Oh, look at that composition. That was quite excellent. Maybe my next one has to be just as good. So in terms of integration and assignments, every time they write a memoir in class, we have a meeting. Or interact. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Did you really say this? Why? Why not? And it actually gets quite heated because they defend their characters intensely. So in different types of activities, interviewing for an apartment rental in the building. You can bring that into the classroom when you're talking about apartment or housing vocabulary. Like I said, we develop a collective development of a love story between two neighbors. I have them decide two neighbors who fall in love. They write the love letter. They write the story of the first date. This is all using the passé composé, the past tenses. Then they write the story of the first argument. And then they write the story of the breakup and what happens after the breakup. So this is a whole week of activities. They do presentations on different artists. From the Bateau Lavoie on Montmartre, they describe, they analyze, they discuss paintings, all within the context in which they virtually live. They discuss how Paris is represented in the film that they watch. Again, I talked about they just have a debate on modern art and a trial for the neighbor's murder. So all of the role plays, often when you do role plays in the classroom, what's happening now is the role plays are building on each other, and they're playing the same person in these role plays, interacting with different types of people. The oral exam is in the immobile context, so they actually have to come in a partner. I give them a role play, and they play the character for their oral exam. And then I ask them questions about the quarter where they live. Who is this character? Describe them for me. I mean, all of these things that we ask them to do in the classroom, adjectives, physical description, personality description, talk a little bit about the character's past. I mean, so bringing all of these things together. At the end of the semester, I have a debate. So I have them come in by two and talk about different issues related to media or art. The quizzes are all task-based. They're all set within this context as well. And then the final chapter of Life in the Building is a skit. So they decide how life in the building ends. And using all the grammar and all of the vocabulary from the semester, this is their final exam where they have to conclude life in the building in an interactive fashion. So that just can kind of give you an idea of how this is set up for me, and just sort of extending from that. I was talking with Pardis about different ideas, and we talked about potentially doing the same thing and maybe setting it in the context of Shiraz, Iran, and adapting the same idea to this context. And I would certainly welcome any ideas, and this is just brainstorming. So please feel free to contribute ideas. But it seemed to have a lot of similarities to Paris, you know, the leading center of arts and letters and presence of many artists and scholars, and known as the city of poets and literature and wine and flowers. I thought this could be a nice place for a simulation. So, course themes within this context. So some ideas that I had for course themes, very similar to the Parisian setup, is, you know, stereotypes of Iran and Iranians, describing people, physical characteristics, personality traits, maybe sort of coupling that with grammar being the adjectives, comparative, superlative. So that being maybe a first unit to begin. Housing in Shiraz, talking about where they live, making suggestions, describing settings, and it may be incorporating direct object markers. Cuisine in Shiraz, so now bringing in certain restaurants, the type of food that's often served in that area. How do you order food at a restaurant? How do you express what you like and what you dislike? Question formation, negation may be included in that. Sites and activities in Shiraz. What can you do there? The important sites. I've listed a few here that I did a little bit of research on, and I'm sure there's a lot of very important and interesting sites you can include. Extending, accepting, refusing invitations. With maybe the imperative is coupled along with this cultural theme. Neighborhoods and transportation. Asking for directions, talking about public transportation, giving advice, prepositions, adverbs. Pardis also helped me come up with this idea for the Kishomat. Is that the right pronunciation? The film? Kishomat. Kishomat, okay. For the film Kishomat, which is an Iranian film which is filmed in Shiraz. And what can happen at this point is, after having gone through maybe 3 or 4 chapters or units within these themes, you can have the students watch this film, and you can review and recycle previously reviewed grammar points, such as describing the characters, comparing the characters, using the superlative to, you know, talk about the character that's the funniest or the strangest, or talking again about stereotypes if you wanted to bring that in. If there's questions that the students have, you could talk about, you could show a clip from a scene of the film where they're eating at a restaurant or at home, and that could be a review of cuisine vocabulary. Maybe they're taking transportation, maybe they're in particular neighborhoods, maybe you could explore that with different film clips. So recycling a little bit of everything that they have previously gone through. And so that's the film there. And then other things that you could continue on with. And again, this is just brainstorming. But the history of Shiraz, pre-Islamic, Islamic period, Iranian Revolution, narrating events in the past tense, active versus passive voice, past tenses could be introduced there. Arts in Shiraz, gardens, mosaic work, poetry, carpet weaving. Describing and analyzing, expressing hypothetical situations. You could recycle the adjectives, the comparative. And then Shiraz today, media and electronic curtain, sanctions, politics, U.S.-Iranian relationships, bringing in the subjunctive, bringing in the conditional, bringing in the hypothetical sentence structure. And then, memoir chapters. So you want to come up with memoir chapters, again, that fit within all of these. And so these, again, just coming from the Paris context and extending out, a self-portrait, again, at the beginning, after the discussion of stereotypes. A self-portrait where they present the character in the first person. They write a description of the city and then the apartment where they live. The second could be all the tenants from the building decide to go to a particular restaurant in the city of Shiraz. And you could pick an authentic restaurant where they could go. And while at the restaurant, they comment on the decor in the restaurant and then talk about what they like and dislike on the menu and what they would like to order. And then a lively discussion happens at the restaurant. What happens? So they start to get involved in telling the story about what's going on in terms of dialogue between neighbors. So the weather is beautiful in Shiraz and one of your neighbors invites you to do an activity. Where do you go? What do you see? What neighborhood do you visit? How do you get there? Describe your outing with your neighbor. Incorporate the vocabulary associated with transportation, activities, preposition, adverbs. And maybe the final one might be, you visit one of your neighbors, an elder who lives in the building, and he or she tells you about life in Shiraz before the revolution. Included in this description is discussion of the Shiraz Arts Festival and a comparison of life today and in the past. So how does this narration happen? And what's nice about this is when the students are writing this, any cultural mistakes that they do make, as the instructor, you can step in and talk about them. So any sort of prejudgments or misconceptions that they might have, you could go in and talk about them. You could write notes about them in class, and you can address them in class. So it's nice to know kind of where your students are with all of that. In addition to the creation of the character, when the students are creating the characters, often we go through a discussion of stereotypes, but there are some students that still include some blatant misconceptions. And I think that's a moment where we can kind of step in and say, hey, would this really be appropriate for this character who lives there? So then integration, assignments, and class activities. So learner-centered assignments. Tenant meetings, we have the same thing. Tenant meetings, they can agree, they can disagree, they can defend, they can provide reasons for actions, they can express emotions about what other people said in their memoirs. You could create characters as well, if you'd like. So you could introduce sort of culturally relevant people by creating characters, like the cousin of famous contemporary writers moves into the building, or the descendant of Sadi, the 12th or 13th century poet, born in Shiraz, descendant moves into the building and is causing trouble in some fashion. I don't know what it is, but you can introduce culturally relevant people by creating characters associated with them.
Speak louder.
Oh, speak louder? Is that okay? Also, another idea is student projects. Paris, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Student projects, creating a weekend excursion to the ruins of Persepolis outside of Shiraz with the neighbors. And so collectively, they have to organize the trip. They have to explore transportation and food and restaurants and activities And collaboratively, they have to organize something. Student role plays. So you and a fellow neighbor discuss what you did in Shiraz over the weekend, having them do research, coming into class, and sharing. You and a fellow neighbor compare and contrast your current living situation. How is my apartment similar or different from yours? You and a fellow neighbor are preparing a dinner for your friends. Discuss the menu and what dishes you will prepare, and then decide what you will need to buy at the market. Like that? Oh, okay. Good? Okay. So they could prepare a dinner. They could prepare a party. What I've done this before, and I say, okay, you're going to prepare a dinner. You're going to have to go food shopping. You're going to have to decide who is doing what tasks each character is doing, and who are you going to invite. Maybe certain characters will be invited and others won't be invited, and why. And those characters that aren't invited could then say, hey, why wasn't I invited? And that causes and starts up a lot of discussion as well. Student presentations. So different neighborhoods in Shiraz, philosophers, scholars, poets in Shiraz. You could have students do research, come into class, and give presentations. So what's nice is that it becomes a sort of cohesive whole for the students, where there's a common bond with all the activities. Or midterm oral exams. Maybe a midterm, a role play dialogue among neighbors. Maybe the instructor afterwards can ask questions about the character, where they live, the city of Shiraz, relationships with neighbors. The final oral exam potentially could be an informed discussion among neighbors with maybe topics provided in advance. Like you could ask the students to come in partners. Pick from a hat one of the 3 topics, the history of Shiraz, Shiraz today, or arts in Shiraz. And they can pick from a hat and have a discussion, an extended discussion about these topics, using the grammatical concepts that you reviewed in class and the functions and culture as well. And then so very similar to the Paris context, you could have them also write a play. They will write and perform a play in which they play the role of their character. They will act out the concluding chapter of life in Shiraz. So what secrets are revealed? What happens to the characters? How would you like to conclude this collectively developed storyline? Including cultural references and the grammar reviewed in the course, costumes, props, sets, be creative. So what's happening is the students are participating in this story. And what's the really fun part about teaching this class is that every single time I teach it, it's so different, depending on the characters, how they interact, what relationships are formed, where the storyline goes is always so different, which is fun for me as the instructor. Composition grading becomes more exciting. In addition, it's also more fun for them, I think, because they have a say. They have choice. They have a voice. So kind of if we go back to constructivist and experiential learning, and the tenets of constructivism and experiential learning, I mean, the idea again is we hope that it's learner-centered. We hope that we give them realistic, relevant environments. So why am I using this past tense? Why am I conjugating? Why am I doing this? I'm doing this for a particular purpose that's motivating and engaging for me, that I can actually imagine, I can envision doing. You provide a lot of opportunity for social negotiation, and not only with you, but with the students in the classroom. I find that, sometimes when I engage them in discussion in this class, I have a hard time getting them to come back to me and discuss, because they're so interested in talking to each other about what's happening in the building that I say, all right, guys, come back. You have to talk to me now. Tell me what's going on. They really get excited about it. Encouraging self-direction, engagement, collaboration, and action-oriented, making them really active participants. And similar to experiential learning, they're They're provided choice. They're provided opportunities for creativity. They're provided opportunities to be inventive. Social, interpersonal skills are encouraged. Collaboration, authentic language use. So again, ways that they can imagine actually envisioning using these grammar functions. Why am I using this? Oh, I'm using this for a really clear purpose that I could actually imagine doing if I were in that target culture. And then again, meaningful reasons. Why am I reading this task? Why am I reading about this modern art museum? Why is this important to me? Oh, it's important to me because now this is this links to the context of my simulation, which then influences me. It also links to the discussion of modern art and debates on modern art, which I really have a lot of interesting and important things to say about. And actually really listening to your students. Communication is about communication. And listening to what, not only the grammatical precision of what your students say, but the content of what they say, and the message that they want to send to you. So that is my presentation. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, and I'd be delighted if you had any ideas for elaboration.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for this truly informative, creative, and innovative paradigm that we can use, hopefully, for our Persian language classes as well. I think we can open this for questions both here and online, virtually. Yes, we have to do, yes. So I think in terms of the technical part, there were a couple of breakdowns, but you can hear me. You can all hear me fine, right? Some people have been chatting along and asking if the PowerPoints are going to be available online, and we are putting them on the NMELRC website. So NMELRC is also recording this audio and video. So it will be on the webinar is going to be available there as well. Okay, so if there are any questions, I think we have 10 minutes to ask questions. Are there any questions? I think you can, yes, you can ask by typing in. So the first question, how grounded in particularities, idiosyncrasies of the language?
Hi. Idiosyncrasies of the language, I'm assuming you mean grammar, and particular grammar structures, and I'm imagining that's what you mean. I wonder if I could get clarification. Okay, yes. In terms of grammar, what we do is we have a textbook that we loosely follow, and the textbook has extended descriptions and explanations of the grammar points in English. And then we have the students do workbook exercises at home, so they get sufficient exposure to the grammar content outside of class. And then in class, we have the students use those grammar structures in functional and meaningful ways. So yes, we absolutely pay attention to grammar. It's very important. It's essential in communication, although we want to make sure that it's not our only focus as well. I see another question. I don't know.
There was an earlier question.
I wonder if you...
Do your discussions of stereotypes and complex planning activities such as collective playwriting occur in the target language?
Yes. They do occur in the target language, but we are very clear about, well, the descriptions, I should say, the descriptions of the assignments are written in English. The discussions in class, all of our discussions in class are done in the target language. We make sure that we guide them effectively, however, by providing them with vocabulary prompts. We provide them with questions, and then maybe the beginning of a prompt that can help them engage in the discussion as well. The second question.
Thank you for a brilliant presentation. The
Oh, right.
Engaging, however, sometimes students get very excited about what the stories they're telling and start speaking their native language. How can we bring them back?
Actually, that's interesting. I've never had that problem in terms of them getting back into the native language. They're always, they stick within the target language because we're very clear from the get-go, from the beginning of the semester, that this is a French classroom. So when they're in the classroom, they're communicating in French. It's part of their participation grade, and because we ask them to do that, we also make sure that our activities are effectively guided and scaffolded so that the students can, so they actually can participate effectively and they don't necessarily have to move back into their native language. So actually I've never, in fact, find them getting very excited and staying in the target language, and then having the only trouble I have is having them getting back to communicating with me, because they're so excited about communicating with each other.
I think the next question is also related to using their first language, but Jenny Fry just asked, how much choice do students really have over the curriculum, the themes, grammar, and functions? The syllabus is already determined, right?
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, the themes are determined. The grammar that accompany the themes are determined, and the functions that accompany the theme is determined. So in that sense, yes, that is organized ahead of time. In terms of choice, choice comes in terms of the direction of the storyline. I often will see that students have particular interests, and I adapt my activities to the characters' personalities. So I might develop a role play based on two characters that have a particularly funny relationship. So in that sense, the storyline and the activities in the class are not predetermined. They're adapted every semester.
Okay, and the next question is about are these activities for upper intermediate level?
No, these activities, I use these activities in beginning French too. At the University of Pennsylvania, they were used at intermediate 1. But you could certainly, I mean, depending on your context, depending on your students, you could decide which level it works best. I've used it at the intermediate and at the beginning French 2 level, but definitely I don't think they're ready at the beginning French 1 level or beginning Persian 1 level.
Mark Burstein has a question about, I'm curious as to how you're able to coordinate use of the textbook with the creation of the virtual community. What might you recommend in the case of less commonly taught languages in which the textbooks may be somewhat limited in terms of interactive approaches?
Well, like I said, I very loosely use the textbook. The textbook is only used as a resource for me for grammar explanations in English, and then the workbook exercises, the more mechanical things that I really don't want to do in the classroom, I have them do outside of the classroom. So the themes in a traditional textbook in my language are, housing, food, transportation, activities, sites, weather, media, film. I mean, all kind of I think they're similar in many languages. So I use the vocabulary linked to that. I use the grammar linked, and I created really my own interactive exercises for the curriculum. And it's come with time. I mean, it's definitely something you want to do as a work in progress. I work with teaching assistants who contribute. We have a course iSite, like a course Blackboard site, and people that I work with, that I teach with, they'll come up with an idea and they'll share it. And so with time, over time, we develop a lot of different activities, and you can really refine your activities and adapt them as you wish.
Muhammad Ansari is asking whether you mainly focus on your own themes, or can we let them describe which themes they can work on?
I predetermine the themes just because I think the themes are linked to the textbook, which are then, so that helps sort of coordinate everything. In terms of choice in terms of presentation assignments, choice in terms of characters and the direction of their character, choice in terms of creativity, I guess I should say. They have a lot of research they need to do, and when they do research in the classroom and then come in and present on it, that's also a choice that they have. So I don't tell them what artists they present on. I'm giving them a list of 10 or 15 artists, and then they choose which one interests them, and they can come and talk about that.
I think that's the last question. Thank you again. Thank you all virtually. Thank you all for our technological staff out at BYU, and thank you all the attendees. If you have further questions, I'm sure that Nicole will be available.
Yes,
online.
sorry, get back in. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. My email is mills@fas.harvard.edu, and please feel free to send me any emails. I'd be happy to answer questions after the presentation. And it was a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you.